Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the San Francisco Playhouse. I'm Bill English, Artistic Director, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our Thursday night Fireside Chats with America's Greatest Playwrights. And tonight we are very, very lucky to have a playwright that I've admired for many years, and many of you in San Francisco have seen his plays at the Magic Theater. Several of them were produced at the Magic Theater, at least two, and they've just been amazingly received and reviewed. Huge hits for the Magic Theater. I think Luis single-handedly kept the Magic Theater in the black there for a few years with his hits. It's interesting that we actually have, I think since I started this about 10 weeks ago, we have our fifth Will Glickman Award winner, because it is the Bay Area annual award for top play of the year has gone to many of the playwrights, starting with Aaron Loeb and Lauren Yee and Peter Nachtrieb, and there are others of them. I saw it on the list. Now I can't remember everybody. But also a MacArthur Fellow and a professor of playwriting at USC, a poet, a performance artist, and a scholar and a playwright. I'm really proud tonight to welcome Luis Alfaro. Luis, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that you accepted, and that we're here and we're able to talk about stuff together. So, are you currently in Southern California in captivity? How is it going down there with all of the stuff? It seems like LA is sort of a hot zone. Is it scary, or you feel?
Well, I think I'm a city boy, like many of us. So as I'm in Koreatown, where if you look at my backdrop, every day is midnight, right? So I like to keep it. I've been in isolation for 140 days, and we're trying to get through it. I am in the densest neighborhood in all of LA County, believe it or not. There's 66 neighborhoods, and I'm in the densest one. And I think the average U.S. Neighborhood, I think, is like what is it? Like 900, and it's 42,000 people per square mile here. So there's a lot of folks. But so I keep it. I have a routine. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, take that walk. I take a walk at night at 11. So I kind of miss the crowds. And then during the day, I'm really busy on this thing that we're on now, right? So I teach on here. I'm on panels, on workshops. It's a way of communicating with the world. So
How has the pandemic affected you as a writer? I know we have a lot of people who are doing commissions for us, and a lot of them have felt stuck, have felt challenged just in the face of this overwhelming kind of a dual pandemic, because we've got the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, and then we've got the George Floyd police brutality, like a pandemic, like an infection that's taken over our country. How has that affected you as a writer?
well, as a writer, I'm really interested in the world. So the one thing that's always been clear to me, maybe because I'm a worker playwright, I've always worked in regional theaters, or I traveled for like 25 years, just nonstop. So this is the one thing I've always said to myself: the only thing that art asks of you is to change. And this is a good example of where I think you really have to do it, right? So change is the constant. And maybe if I wasn't a teacher, but because I was teaching at USC when we had to stop mid-semester and go online, I had to adapt very, very quickly. So adaptation is something I do well, and it's something that I think I just had to do. And so, I'm doing a lot more research. I wouldn't say I'm doing as much writing, but today I read a play for the Ojai Playwrights Conference, which I'm a part of right now, and that's online. And so, I was shocked that I had a whole first draft of a new play. So that, I say I'm not writing, but in fact, I'm always writing. So, I think because it's so hard to motivate yourself, I'm on a really strict schedule. So I try to, get up in the morning, and I try to do some writing in the morning, research in the afternoon. I'm living as if I'm like on a retreat somewhere at Headlands. I'm living like I'm at some summer camp And it's just been 140 days of summer camp. But I'm trying not to get carried away by the despondency or the negativity or any of that stuff, right?
Right. Right. But you would not have been happy if somebody had told you you were going on a 140-day solo retreat. You know?
Absolutely. No, I think the interesting thing for writers is we have to go inward so much, and so maybe that's also not this is not a place that seems unusual, right? What I'm
Right.
mostly
Right.
worried about is I'm worried about the community. So I'm also involved in community actions and getting people motivated to go out and do their work. And so there's a part of me that's also trying to not be too public, but be public,
Right.
and be safe and all that stuff that you got to do. So yes, it's an interesting time to be a writer. I'll say that much.
It definitely is. Yeah, I read that wonderful interview that you sent me. That's a part of your book, your Greek trilogy, right? Your 3 Greek plays that's being published by Methuen Press. So everybody, it's this shameless Luis promotion here. We should have a copy to hold up. Octavio, when I interviewed him a few weeks ago, he actually had a copy of his book. And
Oh, he's so smart.
for the viewers at home, yeah, always be promoting. But I hope I read that interview and I was struck by a comment that you made of a lesson you learned from Maria Irene Fornes that you should write about right now. You write about the now that we're in, and it struck a chord with me because when I was in undergrad school and I took my first history of theater class, which that was the thing that got me to be a drama major over other things I might have done because I was so fascinated with ancient theater and history of theater. But the professor said something. He said, there has never been a play, unlike art or music. Sometimes artists or poets don't get discovered till after their death or several generations down the road. They go, oh my God, this is the greatest poet, or oh my God, we should have paid more attention to Vincent van Gogh when he was alive, But playwrights, there is no example in history of a play that was not successful in its own time. And I didn't believe him. I said, that cannot be true. So I challenged him. He said, well, go find me one. And I couldn't. It's just that when I read that comment of Maria Aaron Fornes, it reminded me of that truth that I had learned so long ago in grad school that you have to write about. And this is the moment, right? Here we are.
Yeah, no, Irene was very important to me. She was my mentor, and I met her just by chance, really. And she said, "Do you want to come study with me?" And I said, I didn't even know who she was. And so I said, "Of course." And then I read Mud, and I thought, "Oh my God, what the?" It was I didn't even understand what she was doing, and she was fantastic. But there was a period in my life where I was very, very confused as a playwright. And she said, "There were many great playwrights before you, and there will be many great playwrights after you. The only thing you have to do is tell the story of today. So relax."
Yeah.
And I thought it was great because I was always sort of running, and it was a kind of meditative moment, right? Write about the moment that you're in. And
Right.
even though I use
Still.
adaptation a lot, right? Even though I use the Greek classics a lot, I am writing about the contemporary moment. I'm writing about this time in my life and being here. And I think we're vessels, right? We carry all this information of our culture, and we process it. We're the translators, we're the channelers, we're the interpreters of a culture. And so I love that because I think it freed me. It made me less stressed about the work, and I just had to focus on being here, being present, being alive today, right?
I like to describe playwrights as the prophets of our time because you all you have more sensitive antenna, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
able to pull down information out of the tumult and somehow translate it. I think of it more as kind of like what's that, ancient process of turning things into gold.
Alchemy, yeah.
Alchemist that turns this tumult into a story that helps us see ourselves. We can't see ourselves. We need a prophecy, and I identify,
Yeah, I think about it.
saying
Yeah.
about being a vessel. It's like as artistic director, what stories do the people need to hear? It's
Yes.
like always my mantra. Like I don't know, I just and it's a totally people say, how do you pick the plays? It's like, I don't even really know, you know,
Yeah, I
except
think
I feel like
yeah,
it's what the people need to hear, you know.
I think it's the, I think of the art process as a three-pronged thing. You need passion, desire, right? Passion for sure. And you need a point of view, right? And then you need craft or technique. So for me, I always think that the POV, the point of view, is the most important thing you can bring, because it's the way you see the world, right? It's the way you process it in. So I describe it as, you know, I do a lot of research. I get sort of full of all the possibility of a play, and then when I've got all the information that I think I need in order to write it, I start to write it. So you kind of become the authority of something, right? Not really, but you become the authority of the things you want to know, right?
Right.
And so every play has a kind of interesting fact that kind of drives you, and moves you towards the thing you want to do. So I was a big, huge fan of Joe Chaikin, and you know, I subscribed a lot to his book, The Presence of the Actor, and he has these beautiful questions in that book. But one of the things I think a lot about in terms of the work he did was he said, move towards the thing that needs you the most. Move towards the thing that needs you the most. So I do that in my politics. I do that in my art life. I do that in my personal life. Move towards the things that need you the most. And in some ways, that always sort of is the defining way that I enter into a play, or I enter into a story, into a character, right? Is try to get out of the way of my own writing. But you know, you have to be filled with inquiry, right? You got to be filled with an interest in the world. Whether you're an artistic director or a playwright or an actor, you must have inquiry. You must have a genuine desire to answer a question.
You know, you and I have come from very, 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 very wildly different backgrounds. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and you know, you're from LA, and from the country too. You know, out in the what you grew up in, sort of out in
Well, I grew up in downtown LA, and then my family is from Delano, Central,
Delano. Yeah,
Central Valley, California.
that's
Yeah.
Luis Valdez is also from Delano, right?
Yeah, we call him the maestro, Luis Valdez. So Luis, I know well. Yes, Luis is also from the town that my family's from, and also, you know, Cesar Chavez. So it's a very storied, very extraordinary place. I come from a migrant farm worker family, and then we settled in downtown Los Angeles, and I grew up literally in downtown Los Angeles. So I've always been a bit of a city boy. Yes. You know, the suburbs scare me a little bit.
I, I can imagine they scare me very much. And it scared me when I was a child too, because I just didn't ever feel like I belonged there. You know, I thought, what is this? This is like rubber stamp people, you know. But what I was going to say is that despite our extremely divergent backgrounds, we have two big things in common. One, a huge passion for Greek theater, and two, that we both kind of grew up in the church.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
my parents were the choir director and the organist at the church, and so like it was like you said, you were in your interview, you said that you were kind of in church daily, really.
Yes, yeah, 7 days a week. My father was Catholic, and a staunch Catholic, so I was an altar boy, and my mother was a staunch Pentecostal, apostolic as they call it, very tied to. I'm near Baptist, right? And so that is a religion that requires prayer service one night, and service to the community one night, and you know, youth service. And so yeah, I think it's, you know, I grew up in a very poor, very violent neighborhood in downtown Los Angeles. And I think the thing that saved me, or else, you know, kind of gave me that out into the arts, was religion, right? Because I was always in a church. I was like one of those kids who was also a Boy Scout. So, you know, I was an usher at funerals, and, you know, visit hospitals and all that stuff. So in a way, I was so busy, you know, I was like the busiest kid in my neighborhood, but in a good way, because I think probably that was one of those clicks in your head that art is expression, that art is service, that art is community, that art is a way of changing the world, right? And so, yeah, I think that really came from our religious backgrounds.
Well,
What
I think
denomination are
also,
you?
of course,
Were you a Christian denomination or?
yeah, you just garden variety Protestant. I call it garden variety Protestant, but you come from the extremes that the
Yes.
Pentecostal and Catholic in the same family. That sounds like nitro and glycerin. It's like that's that's intense. Did they fight over religion? Your parents? Did they argue about
They were
that's
very respectful. They were very
yeah.
respectful of each other. So my father had us on Sunday. We lived together and everything, but my father took us all to mass on Sunday. My mother wouldn't go to mass, and then during the week, my mother made my father go to the other service. And so, yeah, no, I kind of liked both because the Catholic Church is ritual. It's very theatrical,
Right.
and when you're a theater kid, you get all the parts of the mass, right? The way it's explained, and you start to understand the kind of theatricality involved. You would help dress the priest, and back then there were like those old Italian guys, the authentic guys that would come over from Italy, and you'd be helping them with the vestments. And then in the Pentecostal church, it's a very loud musical tambourines, speaking in tongues, full immersion in water, all of that. So in some ways, church religion is the first step into a theater,
I
right?
think so. Yeah, like the Greek. Well, of course, for the Greeks, their theater was their religion, and for us as theater artists, the theater is basically our religion, and the rituals that we create in the theater are what we use to connect ourselves to the divine and the community and to our hearts and our spirits. As we do that together. I was from high school. I was fascinated with the Greek plays, and I read them all and and directed them. And then in grad school, I was my I did as a director. I was getting my MFA in directing, and my project was to direct the Euripides, the Orestes play, which was at the time I was in school was very hot because it was about rebelling against the old guard. And maybe like kind of like now we got these generation people in their 20s, they want to tear it all down, and just
Yeah.
basically destroy it, right? Because and I think Euripides felt that way about what Athenian civilization, decadent, evil, kind of corrupt, had
Yeah.
become. So that was my take on that particular play. And I was also a huge Medea fan. Did you ever see that wonderful little movie called it's a Greek movie, and it's a play about a great Greek actress, uh, you know, played by Melina Mercouri.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Of
Melina
course. Yes.
Mercouri. And
Yes.
she's gonna do a production of Medea at the Acropolis in the Greek theater, and she hears it's called A Dream of Passion, I think.
Yes. Yes. I think you're
Uh,
right. Yes.
and she hears that there is an American woman in prison in Greece somewhere for killing her children. And so she goes to see this woman who is just nuts, I mean, just so passionate and just out there wild, played by Ellen Burstyn. And so the movie
Mm.
is just I wondered if did you ever see that or hear
Yeah,
about it?
I saw it early on. I wrote two versions of Medea, believe it or not.
Right.
And yeah, and one was done here in San Francisco called Bruja at the Magic. And then I did a completely like different spin, a play called Mojada, and it was done at in Chicago at Victor Gardens, and then most recently at the Public Theater in New York off Broadway. And so it's had this. The Medeas have had this very interesting life. They kind of it's been going around a lot, and yeah, I was very fascinated. Also with the visual artwork of Medea, so many artists have are sort of obsessed with the Medea myth, and also in our culture. I think there's so much about what's going on in contemporary culture that captures the Medea myth as well. So, yeah, the Greeks are very contemporary.
Well, about
They
her
really,
being an outsider, right? About her being from another culture and not understanding the culture she was plunged down into and not being respected by it.
yeah,
That's very much about being an immigrant, right? And
Yeah, well, one of the elements that was really, I started working on this at the Getty Villa in Malibu, and they've been very, very helpful, the Getty people. And so one of the first things that happened is one of the curators there, the scholar, a woman named Mary Hart, said, "I think you should go look at this YouTube. There's an actress in the 1950s who was a very legendary kind of like actress performing. They have these YouTube selections, and you should see one." And there was one where she's standing there and she's giving the big Medea speech, very 1950s acting, right? And then the chorus stands around there, and I always remember this. They stand, and they say, "Look at her soiling our land." And I thought, oh, this is a foreigner immigrant tale, and this is about somebody who's not wanted on a certain land. And then that kicked into, okay, so I started doing all this research in San Francisco, in Daly City. So the guys that are outside of the Home Depots, right, looking for jobs. And then that started to escalate into thinking about Medea as somebody who's making a big trip to a country that does not want her, So I love the way the Greeks are timeless that way, the way the themes of the Greeks still resonate with us so completely. And in some way, it's disappointing because you hope that we've evolved as a culture, as a people enough to have learned the lessons of the Greeks.
yeah,
But
I'm
not sure.
I think there's like 37 plays or something. There aren't very many of them, but there's some that are. I have a few of them that I wish there was a cool new adaptation of. Aaron Loeb and I tried to do an Alcestis.
Oh yeah, I saw a beautiful production, a beautiful adaptation by a company called Critical Mass.
Yeah.
Nancy Keystone. It was unbelievably
Where
beautiful.
was this? Where's Critical Mass?
Critical Mass is located in Los Angeles. They tour the country and they perform a lot at Portland Center Stage.
Oh.
And they're really wonderful company. Really, the artistic director Nancy Keystone is quite extraordinary. But it's like that's a really good example of I love that production. I just like that was a great story. Yeah, it's true that sometimes we don't see a lot of these, right? A lot of these stories.
I've always been fascinated by Philoctetes.
Well, yeah, there's another one.
Play. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I saw a disability on a disability theme that
Really?
somebody did. Yeah, I wish I could remember the name of the writer, but that was
the Theater of War. Wasn't the Theater of War? Was it?
No, it was like 1990s, early 1990s. It's really powerful.
Based in disability. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody sort of gives their hand at a Greek. I'm still looking at them, and I'm due another one at the Getty next year. So.
And what is that? What is you're developing a Greek adaptation, or?
I'm looking at the Oresteia, but I'm trying to just take it in parts because it's so overwhelming. And I love this theme at the end of the Oresteia, which is the lost play, right? Which is about justice. How do we go from family justice to community justice? Right. And that's an interesting idea to me. What was the moment where we went from the familial justice that we doled out in the early days.
The eye for the eye, the tooth for the tooth.
Exactly.
Like ancient Hebrew Arab justice from the Middle. Right. It is coming from the Middle East, and then a lot of people sort of, a lot of the wisdom about the Oresteia is that it is really about the creation of community justice.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. And so I've been exploring the last, book, the fourth book, which doesn't really exist. We only know it in notes, right? And that's always kind of freeing for a playwright. You only know it in notes. Well, what are those notes, right? What do we know about it? What do we know what was it representing, right? So I love those kinds of things. Really, I use the Greeks to launch. I'm loyal to the structure, but I'm really launching into contemporary. I use the Greeks to talk about what's going on in the world today, right?
Yep. Somebody's at my door trying to deliver groceries.
Oh.
So I'm texting Susie because they won't just leave it because there's a bottle of wine in it.
Yeah.
Instacart. I've been like, I'm like old. I don't want to go to the grocery store. Because our theater does so much food, we have like an annual membership, But yes, of course. I'm sorry, I didn't miss what you said, which is you use the Greeks because they are eternal and deal with eternal themes to drop those eternal themes down into your neighborhood, like you say in
Yeah,
Tucson and in LA, right? Where you reflect them in the local culture.
yeah. Oh, the whole family is there. I love this. This is like real. This is really a fireside chat.
Oh, it is. Yes, Susie.
Getting my wine.
Getting my wine. I love
when I text that there's wine involved, then she wakes up out of her like.
I'm
reverie.
watching upstairs.
She's watching us. Yeah, that's just so amazing, and it also something else you mentioned is about listening.
Yeah.
And about
I think the lesson
is really more about listening.
Well, I think the Greeks are really what I love about the Greeks too is they present the question, right, but they don't give you the answer, which is the most frustrating thing. But we as the audience have to wrestle with that as a community. And I love that notion because all the plays that I've worked on have been about a societal issue. The prison system in California. I've talked about gang culture in California. I've talked about immigration in California. So in some ways, I'm always I'm always wrestling with these ideas, but I think I'm trying not to give the audience the answer. I'm just showing you what happens, right? And so I love that about, especially Oedipus el Rey for me was, is it destiny or is it fate? And, how best to represent that in terms of what's going on in terms of prison culture, right, is really, really important. Are you paying for the Instacart now?
Well, I see they need my driver's license.
Because mine expired during COVID.
Susie her license expired during COVID, so she can't get it renewed.
This is a very domestic fireside chat. We're learning all about how this family works.
Well, or doesn't work, But, yeah, I'm also I think the Greeks did write great parts for women.
That's what I write.
Like, how our culture has been so sort of male dominated, and all the great Arthur Miller, blah, 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 playwrights, there's no great parts for women. It's all about men, macho, whatever thing. But the Greeks did write great roles for women. And you've taken that concept and really turned it into some powerful women. Jocasta really is what the story is about in Oedipus el Rey. And
yeah, but I think, what's interesting about the Greeks is if you read the original Greeks, what I think sort of tends to happen sometimes is that you hear Jocasta has hung herself before the play even starts. Yeah. So in some ways, I'm trying to, in the Greeks, let that female character be in the play to tell her own story, right? So that you can shift, because the Greeks themselves, the festivals, they were like, if you think about Medea, that's a male construct. I mean, there's the only reason Medea looks like a shrew is because they needed her to be a villain, right? So what happens in my version is she's young and beautiful, and it really messes with people, right? She doesn't have that sort of little mustache, and then right, that's not who she is. And in fact, I might say that in my version, she might have done something right. What does it mean if she commits infanticide, right? For a reason. And what would be that reason, right? And so I think what's interesting,
at least it's something we can feel. We identify with why she does it. And so we understand it and we empathize with her. And that doesn't make it right, but it makes it human, and it gives us a chance to accept her action.
Yeah, I think for me, the Greeks always start, I always do the whole sort of story, the backstory. I try to put it on stage. And for me, the Greeks always start in that place where, it's not the place where they're mean. It's like, how did they get mean? Or why did they go there, right? And so I love the idea that I could start a Greek, not with that speech that's like, here's everything that happened, but rather, let us show you everything that happened. And now we are at that crucial moment where a person is going to make a life and death choice. And what is that choice, right?
Yep, you get the person in the vice,
That's right. That's
see a
right.
human being in a situation where there's no good choice, and
Yeah.
watch them writhe.
Yeah, because contemporary audiences don't want to hear about what happened off stage. They want to see it on stage, right? They want to see the action unfold on stage. And I think that's one of the joys of like activating the Greeks in that way, right? It doesn't have to be, this is what happened and this is how he died. No, show it to me. I want to see that scene where they decided they were going to do this murderous thing, right? Because then I think we understand the character here, right? Or
Yeah.
emotionally. And I also think that I'm writing love stories. I think that everyone I've written, Electra, my version is called Electricidad, is a familial love story of a young woman who adores her father. She'll do anything for her father. She's loyal. And then Oedipus is about this amazing hot couple who I actually try to convince the audience they should be together, and we know they shouldn't, right? But they don't know this, right? And then
Right.
Medea is a great love story. It's a great love story that falls
You,
apart,
you,
right?
and when you bring the audience to that point where they wish that Oedipus and Jocasta can be together, you've accomplished a miracle.
Yeah, I mean
Because
the reason, yeah, the reason Oedipus had it's on its 48th production, and the reason it's gotten so many productions is because there's a minute in the middle of my play. There's a moment where these two lovers, they've just had made love, right? This couple, and she says, "What do you want to be? What do you want us to be?" And they unfold, they unpack, they tell each other how wounded they are, and they see that they're two wounded people in the world who need to be together. They don't know that it is the biggest transgression, and they'll pay for it. But the audience has a swoon moment where they say, oh my God, because they know that they're going to have to pay a price for that, right? But there is a moment where you watch them fall in love, and that's important. That's really important.
I have one other thing that I was struck by is that in a lot of your work, and I think this is something that as an artistic director, I almost would encourage you to go into more deeply as you maybe try to tell another story, is sort of the corruption of the machismo kind of attitude. The sort of the what we have now is this society, and I resemble that remark because I am one, but it's sort of like the sort of the death of the white male as the example of what people should be, and I feel that in your writing already, and I think we're at a time when that mantle is going to have to be given up. That's why so many of our leaders are clinging to power and clinging to the past so much, because they're, I mean, to me, I'm fine. I take the power. I just like, or
It's
I
important.
think I am, but then I think also innately we're sort of afraid of change.
Oh, absolutely.
We're
All of
afraid
us. So yeah, everybody is, right?
the Greeks, in a way, they began the male dominated
Yeah.
Western world, right?
Yeah.
And now we're, I think, going to see the end of it.
Yeah. I mean,
Hope
I
so,
think
anyway.
I hope so too, because in some ways, that's what I'm writing, right? My three Greeks, for sure, are not about the patriarchy; they're about matriarchies. They're really about world of women and what women can bring to the world, what they can do, and without apology, right? And so I think that's always what I'm trying to write. And most of my plays are about women. It's interesting because I'm writing a play right now about an order, a monastery, and it's all men, right? But in truth, I'm really writing about how these men were raised by their mothers, right? How they got to the place that they were able to channel into spirituality. So, in some ways, I think, yes, what are we doing? This is the moment. This is the time of great change. If we're not using the pandemic and we're not using the uprising that's happening as a motivating, as a, catalyst for how I don't want to go back to the same theater I was at before. I don't know how you feel. You're an artistic director, but I don't need to go back to the same theater that I was in before. And I work at
Right.
big regional theaters, right? But the truth is, um, they're not They're not actually that organized. They're not that diverse. They're not that interesting. It's a time of great experimentation because you can wipe the slate clean and say, what do we need to see in our culture? Move towards the thing that you need the most. And the thing we need the most, if I look at San Francisco, is a very, very problematic city, right? The have and the have nots. Why are we not? If anything, I want to move towards Brecht. I want to move towards Dario Fo. I want to move towards those masters, right? Because in some way, I think that's the real question of why do we have cities anymore, right? Why do we need these cities? Why do we need these great metropolises if they don't, in fact, support their art? If they don't, in fact, reflect the current state? One thing that your city, San Francisco, and my city, Los Angeles, really suffer from is this homeless situation. It is humongous. It is the single most important issue in our community right now. There are so many people on the streets and in San Francisco. Where are those stories? And how do we tell that story in such a complicated way that people really have to wrestle with what's going on? And I don't think it's just about them and us. It is the we of community. That's what the Greeks do to me, right? The Greeks say it's not about you and them and us. It's about we. What are we going to do? How do we solve this problem? How do we come together and make something change, shift?
Or how
So
do we
art,
create justice?
yes, art and politics run hand in hand. And as a person of color, I can say that that's just not even my natural inclination. It's the way I work in the world because it's the world that I live in. So to not address it in some way is to not be authentic and true to who I am.
Well, maybe it's time for the Bacchae.
Well, I've been looking at the Bacchae. It's so
Well,
good.
the Bacchae is
Yeah.
about the destruction or the destruction of the male archetype leader, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful leader, who is brought down by his refusal to acknowledge the unconscious, the
Yeah.
female, right? The female,
Right.
the
That's right.
sense of abandon,
Yes.
and that's kind of what a period we're going through, I think, in a way.
I'm working on a Mother Courage called Mama of the Row, and it is about Mother Courage on the current Skid Row, who survives by exploiting her fellow homeless citizens. And that is a very interesting story because we know that there are a lot of smart people on the street. We
Sure.
know that there are a lot of people who are on the street by just one check, one missed paycheck, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is like these stories are like timeless for a reason, and they speak to us today. They speak to us right now. And how do we keep writing? How do we keep, making the art? It might feel like a pause moment, but in truth, we have to be actively working towards the theater we want to come back to. How are we going to come back? When are we going to come back? How do I invent a kind of theater that allows me to come back sooner than later, right? So this thing right here that I hate is also a way. It's also a way of expression, right? So
yeah, here we are, going at it,
Yeah, I'm not too precious to say that. I love hearing my plays in this format too because it keeps the writing going, it keeps the expression going. It allows us to connect with one another, and that is the most important thing we do in the theater. We must come back in human form, right? We must come back and we must come back to the ultimate sport, which is this humans coming together to witness something, to have catharsis, whether it's in baseball or whether it's on the stage, right? But that is something that we crave. That's something that we need. It's something that we learn. I tell people I go to the theater to learn how to be a better human being, right? And when I was young, one of the first plays I saw was this wild play by Norman Mailer about a serial killer in the Valley of the Beast. Wow, what a play. I learned how to be a better person by looking at a bad person and saying, I'm never going to be that thing, right? And so isn't that Shakespeare too? right? Isn't that all the classics? So in some way, I think we're always learning. We're always enjoying, of course, the spectacle of theater, but we're also there to become better human beings. There's a spiritual element, as you say.
Yeah, I was thinking about the fact that when you were talking about Medea and how she'd always been done with the hag with the mustache and was sort of a stereotypical villain, how in Elizabethan times how Shakespeare wrote Shylock to appease the Elizabethan appetite for anti-Semitism, but he just couldn't help himself.
Yes,
And it took 200 years till David Garrick in the 200 years later showed the audiences that Shylock didn't have to be played as a stereotypical villain, that he had a heart and a soul, and it was in there the whole time. It was in there to be dialogue and in there to be
absolutely. One of the things I love about teaching is when I take a classic play and I say to a student, let's say a female student, I want you to play Lear, right? And last year, just going to see Glenda Jackson take on Lear was one of those great experiences where she brought her power as a female, but also she brought her femaleness to that role. Right? She did something very powerful with that thing. And I love when we're able to challenge the classics in that way. Do they all have to be played that way? No. Right? We learn something, and every generation learns something about itself. And right now, I feel this is a generation that's learning about generational violence, right? It's learning about the very institution of our country, which is that, as hard as it is to say, two elements of what made this country is slavery and genocide. So this is something we have to reckon with, and we can do it through art. We can do it through plays, through learning the stories of our culture, and also learning how power comes to be, right? So the thing that's amazing is I love it when I go see a play that not only entertains me, but also challenges me to the point that it really upsets me, right? Because then we want to be upset. We want to be upset, good or bad, right?
That's it. Listen, thank you so much. That was fabulous. So much fun.
Thank you. What a pleasure to meet you.
Touch and share ideas about what you're working on and what I'm thinking, and we'll let you go on with your evening, getting ready for your late night walk, and
yes,
let people go on with their dinners. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to Luis Alfaro's conversation. It's been a thrill having you be able to talk to all of our patrons about life and art and theater and the times we live in. Thanks so much, and hope to see you all next week. On Monday, everybody, before you go, we're going to have, in our Zoomlet series, we're going to have The Star of Bethlehem by Susan Bradbeer, and it's going to be directed by Giovanna Sardelli. So please tune in Monday evening. Wall options where a director and a playwright work on a play right in your living room. Next Thursday, we have something really special. We're a little departure from our playwrights. We're going to have our producing director, Susie Damilano, is going to be hosting the session, and she's going to be sharing thoughts and feelings about the acting and career with Julia Brothers, one of our city and our nation's great actors. So please tune in next Thursday for a very special edition. We're going to call it the Cocktail Hour with Susie, and we hope you all will mix yourself up a great cocktail and join us. So thank you once again. Those of you who contributed when you got your free ticket for this, thank you, and you'll have an opportunity afterwards to contribute again. We're trying to keep our theater alive and functioning through this dual pandemics that we're facing. So thank you once again, and good evening.